Welcome back to the Celtics Nation Rise podcast. I'm your host, Griffin Aldrich. Alongside me is my co-host, Seamus Zarlingo. I won't lie. Welcome back to episode 40. Sorry, before I start yapping. Presented by Celtics Talk Weekly, but I won't lie. Yesterday was down and gloomy for me yesterday, but I met Patrick Dempsey. I wanted to mention that really quick. That was a little fun, but the day after, no matter how great it is, whether you go to a Red Sox game, whether you meet Patrick Dempsey, do something fun to get your mind off of it, you're still down in the dumps about the Boston Celtics season coming to an end. Um, it's a day. It's like the day after a loss, because you look at it and you don't get to see Celtics basketball for a while now, a while. And I think the most painful thing for me is when you see the rest of the league go along and you see someone raise that trophy and it's not the Boston Celtics. It hurts. It really cuts like a nail, it cuts like a knife right in the heart. Devastating end to the season. And I was really hoping our last, coming into this episode 40, like I was from episode 1, I was thinking, wow, we are going to come into the last podcast holding that trophy. But it didn't turn out that way. Seamus, what are your initial thoughts breaking down and looking back at the 24-25 Boston Celtics season? How are you feeling after that loss to the New York Knicks in Game 6?
Well, when you talk about feeling, I mean, I don't think that series could have ended any worse for the Boston Celtics. I mean, come on. This is what happened to the Celtics in this Knicks series was just catastrophic. It was catastrophic from just the simple fact the Knicks overtook the Celtics in the series and just were simply the better team after we were talking all season long, the Knicks not even being a threat to the Celtics, and they turned out in the end of this season to be the better team. Not only that, but the Celtics just walk out of this series with a myriad of injuries and a plethora of injuries the Celtics walk out of this series with. I mean, you think about Kristaps Porzingis. We have no idea what his unidentified upper respiratory illness is. Jalen Brown, he comes out of this series with a torn meniscus, and we'll
Can I,
get to that
can I put this?
later.
Well, I think we could talk about it really quick. I feel like this is breaking news. We won't go crazy on it, but Seamus, you want to read this and say what's going on really quick?
Well,
We're not going to dive
Jalen,
deep.
it came out yesterday. Jalen Brown finished the season with a partially torn meniscus, and he will be reevaluated this week to determine if surgery is needed. But we all know too, not only Jalen Brown, not only he was injured after this series, very serious injury. That would be the talk of the town if, of course, Jason Tatum didn't go down with his torn Achilles. So you have Brown, Tatum, Porzingis, and then outside of them, you also have the Sam Hauser ankle injury. That's not too
Yeah.
concerning because we saw him tweak it and he came back in the series. But then Drew Holiday, he was dealing with a hamstring injury coming into the Knicks series, so that was something as well. I'm trying to think of any other injuries we had. I mean, Pritchard was healthy, Horford was surprisingly healthy, and Derek White as well. And
Can I
then
say though?
everybody else. I mean, everybody else was injured at a certain point. So we had three guys out of our top eight who were healthy. Five of them were not.
And you gotta mention Tillman, who is always banged up. I guarantee there was some
This
bone
is
in
the
his
time of the
body.
year where we're in the playoffs. I'm done mentioning guys like Tillman and
Yeah.
Shireman and Craig, and no, I believe Shireman will play a role on the team next year. Craig's gone. I don't really understand what the whole usage idea was with him. I believe he was brought in halfway through the season to make somewhat of an impact, and it just never happened at any point in time. And I'm just like in the playoffs, like these are the players I'm done with. Like on the Knicks side of things, it's like, is Campaign gonna play? Huck Porty, is he gonna play? It's like, no, these guys are just never gonna play. It's the NBA playoffs. Achua, it's like he's getting the garbage time minutes in the NBA playoffs. All the guys at the back end of the roster, it's like, not really concerned about other than maybe them being a future piece for the Celtics or any team. But I just think in terms of this season for the Celtics, there were a lot of themes throughout the regular season that unfortunately came about come playoff time. And it's very unfortunate that we talk about this when it comes to the Celtics team because we were thinking coming into playoff time, a lot of the bad habits in which the Celtics presented us throughout the season were gone. I mean, we thought in March the team went 14-1 and they looked utterly dominant throughout the month of March. The only team the Celtics lost to in March, it was on March 12th. It was to the Oklahoma City Thunder. I mean, that was the only team that defeated the Boston Celtics in March. And it felt like at that point, okay, the Celtics are turning up and they're getting rid of their bad habits. But even during the stretch to end the season, right? The last 10, 15 games of the season after the March stretch, right? You go through March, you're 14-1 through the Celtics. You have a couple games there in April, especially the last 10 games stretching into April. It felt like a lot of bad habits started to come back at the end of the season, at the end of the regular season. Except at that point, we were thinking, oh, well, the Celtics, they just had a 14-1 March, plus they're resting for the playoffs because they're already secured in that number two seed. We're thinking at the end of the season, while the Celtics, there's 10 games left. Oh, they're bad habits. Don't pay attention to them because they're resting their guys. They're locked into the two seed. They just had a 14-1 stretch in March. These guys will be fine. They've kicked their bad habits. But the reality was those bad habits were still happening at the end of the season. And although it wasn't to the catastrophic level, and even in the middle of the season, we saw it wasn't to necessarily a catastrophic level. Uh, although although the end of the season, it wasn't, you know, to a level of, again, I want to use the word catastrophic or catastrophe, but I just don't feel like that's the right usage. It's just stumbling in the middle of the road. I mean, in the middle of the season, the Celtics were a pure 500 team, and they were 14-11 through a 25 game stretch in the middle of the season. And then at the end of the season, I mean, we weren't getting to that level of going, oh, look at this huge sample size of the Celtics going 500. But the Celtics were blowing leads. They were not holding on to leads, and in some games they were actually playing from behind, and it just felt like, oh, some of those bad habits offensively, defensively, the shot chucking was coming back. Defensively, some of the rotations aren't that crisp, and it just felt as if, oh, some of these bad habits are coming back right now. The Celtics are still beating inferior opponents, but I just I told Franco, and it's funny, like I want to pull the receipts. We were on here talking about, as the has this Celtics team showed us enough? Have they displayed enough throughout the month of March and April to suggest their bad habits from December and January are completely gone? I know we think they've rid themselves of a lot of those bad habits, but are they completely gone? We had
Cannot
a
say.
legitimate conversation about it, and it seemed crazy at the time. But now you look back on it after this Knicks series and go, wow. I mean, we should have been talking about that a lot more because those bad habits, specifically on just both ends of the floor, not rotating to the highest level, not being physical, not being the more tough team, not being the tougher team, not being the more physical team, not being the faster, quicker team. That was a theme of the Celtics all season long against several opponents, and then just offensively going through the motions, shot chucking. Those themes arised in the playoffs when the Celtics faced the Magic, when they faced particularly the New York Knicks in the first two games of that Knicks Celtics series. And then it wound up ending their season. And we said in January, you know, is this team ready? Or now are they serious in going back to back? In March, it seemed like that was the case. But by the time April rolled around, the wheels, I mean, they did start to fall off the wagon. We heard about the Jaylen Brown injury, Kristaps Porzingis. He was dealing with his illness, and we didn't know what was going on behind the scenes, but everything seemed fine. But you know, obviously, as the playoffs went about, things are not fine with Kristaps Porzingis, and now we just sit in this era of the unknown for the Celtics now. The unknown. I mean, we went from, if you win that game four, you're right on track of going back to back. And I'll say this. I said this on post game the other night. The Celtics lost three straight games in the Knicks series where they could have tied the series. It was 0-1, or it was 1-0 Knicks. The Celtics have a chance to so the Celtics had a chance to make it a best of 5, a best of 3, and then a best of 1. They go 0-3 in all these situations. In game 2, the Celtics have a chance to make it 1-1. They lose that game. In game 4, the Celtics have a chance to make it 2-2. They lose that game. In game number 6, the Celtics have a chance to send it 3-3 to game 7. They lose again. And so just in the Knicks series, the Celtics, I mean, we can talk a lot about the Knicks series as well, but just when we talk about the building of bad habits for this team and the wheels really falling off the cart, I mean, I would say it started with Jalen Brown's knee injury back in March. Jalen Brown back in so I mean, just to give it out, Jalen Brown, he played 8 of the last 16 games of the season. All of those all of those 8 games, right? 8 of 16. So he only played half of the final 16 games of the season. All of those games that he played, Jalen Brown played under 30 minutes. However, the 8 games prior to that, Jalen Brown played 8 of the 10 games and he played at 30 minutes. He played at least 30 minutes in all of those games. So that's when you could start. That's when we're kind of starting to question the Celtics playoff run of, oh, if Jalen Brown, if he's not healthy, how far can they go? And how can this impact the Celtics playoff run? But then at the end of the playoff run, it seems like Jalen Brown's meniscus tear is like number 3 on the list of what we're talking about going into the offseason. Number 1 being Tatum
Yeah.
and what the Celtics do in regard to how they operate the roster next season.
Oh, I
Office
think
does in the offseason for next season, knowing Jason Tatum's going to be out. Plus, you just have all these other lingering questions about veterans such as Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis, Al Horford, and uh, and Jalen Brown. Now, you torn meniscus. We'll have to see what happens with him, but the 2024-25 season, it's going to be an interesting year to look back on. 61 wins, somewhat of a good season, like just in the grand scheme of, did you win a lot this season or did you lose a lot? The Celtics won a lot this season, but they came up well short of their goal for a title this year, and they lost to just one of the worst opponents to I shouldn't I when I say worst opponents, I'm not technically talking about the Knicks and their level of play, but just the Celtics fan base and losing to a New York team. Like, I think the
it
only the
feels
only two opponents that would be worse than this as a Celtics, for
Lakers
the
or Heat.
Celtics fan base, it'd be no, not even the Heat. It would be the Lakers and the Sixers, straight
Okay,
up.
yeah,
The Heat, the Heat are. We've seen the Heat have success. The two teams we haven't seen have success over the Celtics recently, the Sixers, and the Lakers, as well as the Knicks. And the Knicks finally find that success over the Celtics, and it just obviously stops the Celtics well short of their goals this season, and that's just what's so hard to evaluate about this season is like, how do we look at this in Celtics history and lore? Because there have been some seasons where the Celtics overachieve, and okay, well, they weren't even supposed to be this, like 2022, they weren't even supposed to be in the finals, and it's like, oh, they lost the finals, but hey, we thought we were going to be a lottery team that year halfway through, and it's like, hey, I mean, we overachieved. 2017-18, I mean, they're the 2 seed, they make the conference finals, they play a game 7 against LeBron James at the Garden. That's a season where it's like, oh,
you
we were stopped well short of a title, but overachieved, and people
and
think highly upon that team. 18-19, that team lost in the semifinals, but that team was supposed to win the title, and they come up well short in the semifinals, and that's a season thought of as like, oh, not that great. But then you think about this season, the Celtics are knocked out in basically the same spot. I mean, that 2018-19 Celtics team, they were expected to win the title and win a fair amount of games, at least over 50 games that season. And they came up with 48 wins and they got knocked out in 5 games in the second round. This Celtics team, they win 61. So they win 13 more games. That's where I'm looking at the season going, okay, that's a 61 win season. That's no joke in NBA history. I mean, you're amongst some of the better teams in history. You're maybe not amongst the total title winning elites, but hey, 61 wins is nothing to gaff at.
yeah.
But then the Celtics, they only make it to game 6 against an inferior opponent. It's just like, I don't know. I don't know how to. We just see there's more excuses for this Celtics team to be made about all the wheels falling off the cart because of all the injuries and just everything going wrong with this team at the end of the season. But it's very hard to think positively about this year right now. Other than we had a lot of good moments, obviously recording, live streaming, covering the team, but just in general, I think we all thought this was going to be a back-to-back year. I I, I believed throughout the season. We thought a lot of us believed if the Celtics lose in the playoffs, it's probably going to be in the finals. It's probably going to be to a tough Western Conference team, and instead it's in the second round to the New York Knicks, who we let's face it. I mean, we disrespected them all season long.
No,
We
it,
disrespected the Knicks and didn't even give them a chance. I mean, it's laughable. Like we made ourselves look like asses. Looking back at the previews and I know we did the rival showdown. And that was supposed
yeah,
to
I
be
was
a
gonna
little
say,
more fun, but it's like
go check
we
out.
were very cocky. Like we were very like, oh Lord, like we were definitely out there about the Celtics, and that
And can
obviously
I say,
just
can I say too? Yeah, you say that and like
that put us in a position of looking like fools. I'll just say that right now.
yeah. Oh, go watch that rival showdown because it was just looking back at it now, this would have been such a funny idea if the Celtics did win, but they did not. And I tell you what, Aiden got his last laugh because he was texting me every game. He was like, "Oh, go Knicks!" He got the last laugh. But you gotta check that out. And I'm gonna say this, Seamus. I agree with what you said about New York teams because you look at the Yankees Red Sox rivalry. You hate that. You look at the Knicks. I look at this in a similar fashion with the NBA. I look at Brooklyn and Boston, Brooklyn and the Boston Celtics. I look at the Mets and kind of the Boston Red Sox. Sorry, I'm all over the place. But like I look at that kind of rivalry. But you said it right there. I mean, it's a disappointment, and I want to bring up this Drew Holiday quote that I wasn't even gonna bring up, but he said, "I think it was a lost opportunity. I think we had the best team in the league. We are disappointed in ourselves. We felt like we let our organization down and the city down." So you see from that Drew Holiday quote that it obviously sucks. Like this stings. And you look at that quote and it kind of summarizes what you said, Seamus, with the season, how it was kind of a letdown. I mean, the Boston Celtics, they went through that 500 stretch, but like you said at the beginning of the season, when we first started this podcast, we were coming on the podcast saying, "Oh, Celtics, you know how we do the previews. We're gonna like you guys know if you're familiar with this program. We go, all right, in the next 4 games, Celtics are going to be 4-0. We were saying that every week for a couple of weeks. However, we got to the point where we're like, can we even give them 4-0? But then they picked up steam again. And I feel like you hit it right on the head. You said that the Boston Celtics, they started at the end of the season, they started shot chucking, they started building bad habits. And I've been a big advocate to say that the Boston Celtics built up those bad habits, not putting their foot on the gas. And you saw that. And the most notable game I go back to is that Utah Jazz game. And I think it was a win, but it's the fact that the Boston Celtics let the Jazz back in the game. And it sucks because I think the thing that we are hoping for is to do something that hasn't been done in so long in Celtics history and to go back to back. And I think another notable factor I pull up is the 2009 season with the Boston Celtics, how the expectations were high and the stake to go back to back was at a maximum right there. And that was expectations for the Boston Celtics this year. However, it ended in a similar fashion. And I'm going to say this too. We need to have the conversation of, was it the Magic series that really killed the Boston Celtics? And I think that's the talk we need to have because the Celtics did get pretty banged up in that series. And I'm gonna pull this back up, Seamus, because you mentioned it, and I didn't mean to cut you off earlier, but this is a serious talk, and we're gonna do a longer take on this over at Celtics Talk Weekly, and we're gonna talk about this later in a little breakdown here at Celtics Nation Rise, but I think that's a factor. You talked about Kristaps Porzingis and his injury. You've talked about Sam Hauser, how he could have potentially helped the series a little bit. We talked very negatively about him during the regular season, but I think he picked it up. We'll get into it later, but he got a Celtics Nation Rise towards the end of the season, so he was picking it up. Um, but there's a lot of factors that were into play. The Boston Celtics could have easily went back to back, and I think are you ready to pull up some quotes about how the season went and how it kind of I think we need to get into some topics
Well,
because
I want to push back against Holiday's quote
yeah,
and the whole narrative that the Orlando Magic series killed the Celtics. I think the Orlando Magic series, it just exposed the Celtics
yep,
early
I
in
think
this
that's valid.
playoff run, and I don't think it killed the Celtics because I thought I especially amidst the Knicks series. I believe to this day that the Celtics were getting ready to fall apart during that Magic series, and not necessarily in that Magic series, but the writing started to show itself on the wall in that series, and then obviously the first two games in the Knicks series just totally downhill from what we expected in those two games. The first two games, the Celtics harboring 20-point leads in games 1 and 2 and just blowing both of them. But I'll say this: when Holiday says, "Oh, we had the best team this year,"
I'll pull this back up.
at the end of the day, all right, at the end of the day, if you look at the end of the season for the Celtics were not the best team in the league.
No,
They simply were not the best team in the league. And to me, that quote right there, um, you can say that. It's like it goes along with the theme of riding on reputation. Is these guys clearly thought they were the best team all year. However, you actually have to put in the work in order to be the best team and not just own that title. You actually have to work and earn that title. You can't just own it by showing up and playing a basketball game. And that was a theme of this Celtics team as well this season, where there were a lot of games where it felt like the Celtics they showed up and expected to win. And that's just not how the game of basketball works. You have to
no,
actually put in the work at a high intense level. And just at the end of the season, I just want to go through this because I want to give out this point because it needs to be given out. I don't know how I didn't get to this in any of the post games during the Knicks series, but now it's kind of looking in hindsight and it's looking, back at the Knicks series and you can come up with this point. The Knicks at the end of the season were a better team than the Boston Celtics. I mean, they were a more active team, they were a tougher team, they were a more physical team, they were quicker than the Celtics up and down the floor at the end of the year, just talking from a team's perspective. The Celtics looked old and rickety compared to the Knicks, who looked quick and spry, and it showed itself on court, especially in that game 6, but throughout the series, and especially when the Celtics went up, they held a lead. It just felt like the Knicks played harder once the Celtics they grew a lead. If the Celtics were growing a lead, I mean the Knicks, it felt like their effort level was just increasing as the game went on to eventually mount that comeback and to mount themselves a win. But you just like if you break down the roster, right? I'm looking at it from this perspective. Ananobi, Hart, Bridges, they outplayed Brown, Tatum, and White at various moments in this series. I mean, all three of those guys, Ananobi, Bridges, and Hart, there were moments in the series where they had better shooting performances, better defensive performances. And I understand, you look at the status and the contracts of everybody and go, oh, well, this guy makes 20 mil and this guy makes 43 and this is Tatum and this is Bridges. How are they anywhere this it doesn't matter. Like literally the contract and the status of these players and oh well this player has all this talent and this ability and Tatum, tough shot maker and can take guys off the dribble, awesome playmaker, top 3 player in the league. All that doesn't matter when Ananobi, Harden, Bridges, they're playing harder, they're getting after it on the boards, and they're getting after it going up and down the floor on the defensive end of the floor. They're driving aggressively offensively, they're hitting their shots offensively and they're shooting at a higher clip because there were definite moments in the series where Ananobi, Hart, and Bridges, they were simply outplaying guys like Tatum, Brown, and Derek White. And specifically those guys at the top. I know some other names on here we could get to in a second, but those are the players. I mean, thinking about Brown, Tatum, and White. I mean, those are the 3 players you're expecting to play tremendously well for the Celtics and make a big impact on a nightly basis, and yet they were being outplayed by the 3 role players in the middle of the Knicks starting lineup, in which included again OG Anunoby, Josh Hart, and Miles Bridges. That wasn't even factoring in Jalen Brunson or Carl Anthony Towns. And mentioning those guys, I mean Jalen Brunson essentially matched Jason Tatum in this series from an offensive production standpoint. Which for whatever you can say about Jason Tatum and oh he's better than Jalen Brunson because he's a better 2-way player and blah blah blah, Jalen Brunson matched Tatum offensively in this series and shot. I mean, he was a more effective player down the stretch. If the ball was in either Tatum or Brunson's hands, especially looking at games 1 and 2, I think even from the Celtics fan base perspective, a lot of us had more confidence in Jalen Brown, or not Jalen Brown, Jalen Brunson. How many times have we done that this series? Jalen Brunson. A lot of us
BJB.
exactly. But Jalen Brunson, I think a lot of us had more confidence in Jalen Brunson actually scoring a bucket down the stretch than we did in Jason Tatum.
I agree.
And
Yep.
and that's unfortunate, and we know how good Jason Tatum is, but that was a reality that was a reality of the series. Is Jalen Brunson was the most clutch player in the series, and he matched Tatum from a scoring perspective, especially when it came to down the stretch of games and early in that series too. I mean, the three games where you look at, whoa, Brunson really matched Tatum. 39 points in game 4. I mean, Jason Tatum was the leading scorer with 42 points, but Jalen Brunson, he scores 39 points, 18 points in that third quarter of game 6. And then games 1 and 2, I mean, Brunson, he was phenomenal down the stretch in both of those games, while Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown, they basically shot the Celtics out of those games. And so Jalen Brunson, just from that pure perspective, I mean, he basically matched Tatum, if not played better than Tatum from an offensive perspective. And then going down the list, I mean, you could say even Jalen Brown too. I mean, Jalen Brown was just really rough in this series and these playoffs, but we know torn meniscus wasn't 100%, very limited of a player. So there is somewhat of a pass to give there. But regardless, I mean, Jalen Brown wasn't putting up his typical offense production either. And then Towns, just moving on to the big man spot for both of these teams, the Celtics and the Knicks. Mitchell Robinson and Karl Anthony Towns, they were more effective as big men in this series than Horford, Porzingis, and Cornette. And maybe it's unfair to put Cornette on that list because Cornette's minutes were actually highly effective as they've been all season. But we're really honing in on Horford and Porzingis. I mean, Horford and Porzingis, Robinson and Towns made Horford and Porzingis look old in this series, old and out of shape, straight up. Because Mitchell Robinson, I mean, Porzingis can't. I mean, normally you have Horford coming off the bench for the Celtics, but Horford started for what? The entirety of the series, I want to say. I think he started every game this series because Kristaps Porzingis, he was coming off the bench near the end of the series, but then Kristaps just wasn't healthy, period. I think Horford might have sat. I believe he might have came off the bench the first game of the series, but Kristaps then started coming off the bench after that because then he missed that second half and you just make I'm gonna look this up real quick while I'm talking about this. But because if you just look at the man, the iPad, the volume just goes the wrong way. I
iPad.
will say when you flip the iPad around, the down volume is up and the up volume is down. But ultimately in this series, I mean, just looking at the big man uh, cores. Robinson and Towns, they were more effective big men on the boards. They were more effective in scoring inside, finishing around the rim, and they just made the Celtics look old. Like they made Porzingis and Horford look old. I mean, Horford, you can say, look, he gave it all. He gave it his all this series because Al Horford, he's 38 years old. They're asking 30 plus minutes of Al Horford per game. And we were sitting there going, okay, well, Al Horford, we enjoy his contribution on the floor. But the reality is, he is just, he can't play this many minutes and be effective in every single minute, especially late in games. And you saw that play out, especially in games 1 and 2 and just throughout the series because Towns and Robinson, I mean, they were just taking the Celtics to town, especially on the boards. And again, the inside scoring and finishing, and felt like Horford and Porzingis. I mean, aside from them not being able to get their three ball up, and just to update everybody here, so Porzingis he started game, he started game 1 and then he started game 5. So Porzingis started 2 games in the series, but even those 2 games he played 13 minutes in game 1, and then in game 5, Porzingis played 12 minutes. So even in the 2 games in which Porzingis started, he only played a combined 25 minutes in those 2 games that he started. So
And can I say
you're
about that?
seeing the Al Horford usage out of the Celtics, and it was just too big of a role to give Al Horford. And you just look down the list. I mean, Pritchard didn't have an impact consistently in this series. Miles McBride had moments off the bench for the Knicks, and just up and down the roster. I mean, Josh Hart seemed like he was a better version of Drew Holiday in this series. I mean, defensively, he was a hound dog. He made an impact this series. He's guarding bigger guys, and he was being that physical guard, crashing the boards, getting tough physical rebounds in this series. And then on top of that, offensively, I mean, Josh Hart had himself a couple of 20-point games in the series and hit a couple three balls. Meanwhile, on the other end of the floor, it felt like Drew could just never get it going. And from that perspective, I mean, the Knicks through and through, if you just look at all the matchups, you go to the Holiday Hart matchup, and I know these guys necessarily weren't necessarily matched up directly on each other, but for the same roles in which they play, right? The same concept of a role in which they play. It's like, okay, Hart outplayed Drew Holiday for that role in this series, that tough physical guard role. And then, you know, Jalen Brunson, he basically outplayed Tatum and Brown, and Anunoby, Harden, Bridges. We talked about them outplaying Tatum, Brown, and White at different moments. And Robinson and Towns, they outplayed Horford and Porzingis. So you just go down the list. I mean, McBride had as much impact on the series as Peyton Pritchard. And so we go down the list and just go, oh, well, the Celtics have all these advantages and all these mismatches and all of these great things are here for the Celtics to take advantage of in this series. And yet you come out of this series and go, it seems like the Celtics did not have a clear advantage in any category in this series at any point in time, despite all the narrative talk we hear and how great the Celtics are, especially when it comes to the individual categories of these players. And that's just, to me, it was a total fallacy at the end. And I want to push back too against the fact the Orlando Magic series did the Celtics in. I mean, there were a bunch of people after that Magic series going, this Magic series was so good for the Celtics because they just played a tough, physical, defensive opponent, and they won't face another defense like this until they meet the Oklahoma City Thunder in the finals. And
Hey,
it's
that
like,
was me. Hey,
I
Seamus.
I I I I don't really feel like getting beat up in a first round series. This is what I was kind of saying. I was going, okay, I understand the one positive silver lining I could take out of that Magic series is going, okay, we found a different way to win. But then you look back and go, I mean, we were
But we
barely
didn't
winning these
use it.
games,
Yeah,
and we
and we
we
barely used
offensively
it.
could not get anything going the whole series. And
Ex-
it's like there were red flags. We were not. I mean, we were letting an inferior opponent who could not score over 100 points in a game. They scored 100 points once. They didn't score over 100 points in a game. We were allowing them to challenge us in each and every single game outside of Game 5, and that's only because Paolo Banchero had to sit the entire third quarter because of 5 fouls. Otherwise, it was 53-53 when he was walking off that floor. So in
Not
that Magic series, I'm here's the thing. In the first round, you want to play an easy series. You do not want to play a tough opponent in the first round. That's what the Celtics ran into this year. And then the fan base, they were drinking the green Kool-Aid going, it's going to be so good for the Celtics. But it wasn't. It was a tough physical series. And to me, it exposed a lot of flaws of the Celtics, knowing, okay, well, the Magic can't score over 100 points. And somehow, some way, in all 5 games, they were able to muck it up to the point where they were in the game every single game. And the Celtics offense, and that was the downfall of the Celtics, in my opinion, in that Knicks series. First and foremost, it was the offense. Later on in the series, it started to be the defense, but early on, it was the offense. I mean, you could say in game two the defense was horrific down the stretch, don't get me wrong, but just the entire, like, 90 points in game two, 90 points, and then in game one you only score 105 in overtime. So the offense was certainly a problem early on in the Knicks series, as it was the Magic series. And to me, the Magic series just exposed flaws of the Celtics. And I don't think it was particularly good for the Celtics, but I also don't think it was completely the Celtics' downfall, because at that point it seemed as if Kristaps Porzingis was already dealing with his illness. And to me, I think the illness is just a giant excuse. If you hear him talk about it, it literally just sounds like he's tired. And I'm like, I've never seen so much excuse giving from any team, fan base, anywhere over a player being effing tired. Like, seriously, if Joel Embiid was tired, if Karl Anthony Towns was tired, Philadelphia and New York would have those two just, I mean, they would be going after him every
can
single
can I
presser,
say
every
that?
single segment. How is it acceptable that Porzingis is sick right now. He sounds tired. He sounds tired, not sick. He sounds tired. I'm sick and
And
tired of this whole story. But my whole point here is the wheels were already falling off for the Celtics by the time the Magic series came around, and they still had a very good chance, obviously, of going back to back. But you want to be playing your best basketball come playoff time, come April. And the Celtics, they played their best basketball in March. They played their best basketball in November and December, essentially. And obviously that fell off in December and January. But the Celtics were not playing their best basketball of the season in April. They were not playing their best basketball this season in the Magic series, and certainly not that Knicks series. And that's, I mean, there are so many reasons as to why the Celtics downfall happened the way it did. And I think the signs were there, but we still had a reason to believe that the Celtics were going to potentially go back to back. It's just, man, you look back in hindsight, there were a lot of things shifting away from the Celtics, and I felt like at the time it's like, all right, kind of noticing things like cracks, but you're going, okay, well, yeah, it's like still in a good spot, but the cracks, I mean, they were too much until the entire bottom of the barrel fell out for the Celtics.
yeah,
But sorry, go ahead, Griffin. I don't know. I'm just rambling on here because it's just funny that the Knicks were so clearly the better team in this series, and it's funny that we're talking about them in such a disrespectful manner all season long, all the way up until the preview.
and I just want to say this though. I really think the Boston Celtics just ran out of gas. And it was a fact of who wanted it more. And you obviously see the Knicks wanted it more, but there were still emotions. I mean, you look at this one, you talked about Porzingis and his injury. I feel like he was visibly upset about what happened with the Boston Celtics. I mean, and this is how I felt after we lost as well. So Porzingis, you're not the only one feeling that way. But I do gotta say this before we get into these quotes, because some of these quotes are hard and it's gonna be tough for me to adjust to. But I want to say my overall perspective on the season. I don't think as I think can we say it's a failure? No, I don't think this. I think yes, because anything but Banner 19 was a failure in this season. But I think we found out that we're old. I mean, Brad is a genius. Brad Stevens is a genius, and I don't have any doubts with what he's going to do with this team. I think he's going to rise to the occasion, and I think Brad is a very smart man, and he's going to do the necessary things in order to bring this team back. But we obviously saw the pieces that he brought in were old, and they did have that 1 year, but they're old. And before we really dive into this, though, I think I need to show this off because I think this will give us a little chuckle before we get into these serious talks. But I think we got to talk about Torrey Craig and that Luke Cornett fit. I mean, this is the thing I'm going to miss most about Torrey Craig because you said he's probably not back on the roster. Daniel said it in the post game show last time, and I kind of mentioned it too to him. He kind of gives off O'Shea Brissett vibes, but not as good as O'Shea Brissett. He's a little bit older. But Seamus, do you got to comment on this fit really quick?
I feel like I have to get myself a Luke Cornett jersey. I mean, it just everybody has one all of a sudden. Torrey
I
Craig
know.
and I, I,
I
I
I saw some on
I've never seen this photo. Where when is this from?
this was the other day, game 6.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So
See, I'm
we
I'm
have
not tapped into the JetBlue runway anymore. Apparently, just
I know we got I'm gonna miss the fits, I'm not gonna lie. But I think we need to hit the hard topics. And that's number one. I think we could start off with this because this is the one that there's been a lot up in the air about, and that's Drew Holiday. This is another quote from him, having two quotes from him. Yeah, I think we still have a really, really great opportunity and a great window to be successful and win a championship again. The opportunity to win is now, and I still want to be a part of that. Drew Holiday. So there's been a lot of rumors about Drew Holiday leaving, and you see him with the championship. He's very happy here. I feel like when he first came to Boston, it was kind of more so like a Luka trade. I feel like not necessarily because I think he was happy to get out of Portland, but he didn't want to leave Milwaukee, and I think he found a home in Boston, and I think that big contract, he was expecting to be a Celtic for the rest of his career. I think signing that 4-year deal, you see that, and he's like, all right, I'm going to retire a Celtic. But now there's a lot of things going around with the luxury tax, da da da, and he could very easily leave. And I think he doesn't want that. And you see with that quote is he wants to be a Boston, and he wants to Boston Celtic, and he wants to be a part of this. And I think you look at this too. He wants to be there, and we talk about that. Do you have anything to say about that Drew Holiday quote though before we get into the next one?
Well, I think that's a classic quote from a player right there that obviously wants to still be within the Boston Celtics organization and likely doesn't want to find another home out there because we forget the NBA, we always look at it in such a transactional manner and go, oh, well, this player, he's going from the Pacers to the Celtics or the Bucks to the Pacers or the Trailblazers to the Bucks. Obviously Drew in his career he's gone from Philadelphia to New Orleans, from New Orleans to Milwaukee to Portland to Boston and Portland. I mean, he never out in Portland, I'm going to go ahead and say all he did there was go to the doctor and take his physical and
Yeah.
they sent him elsewhere. Like I feel like I don't know if Drew Holiday spent one day in that facility other than taking his physical with the Trailblazers.
I mean,
But
it was.
regardless,
Can I say too? It was very known that he was going to be a Boston Celtic, and that's when I got
right. I remember it
confident.
was like, all right, when is the notification going to come out that we
Yeah, it was like,
traded
all
for
right,
Drew
it's
Holiday?
undeniable. And I was like, if he's not a Boston Celtic, then we're doing it wrong. And I want to pull it up, Seamus. If you could find it, that'd be great. The picture of him and Brad having the biggest smile on his face because Brad knew right there that that was the championship. Brad's like, this is the championship.
But
So
but we always look at these players like oh, just transactionally player X going from team Y to team Z. And that's sometimes just a very flawed way to look at the logistics of everything. Like, yes, from a business perspective, like, yes, transactionally things are going to happen in, a straightforward manner. But at the same time, there is a human element to all of this as well, knowing, especially from Drew's side, where he probably doesn't want to move again. I mean, he has a couple of kids, he has a wife, they've established themselves, I'm sure, in Boston. He just signed this 4-year deal with the Celtics. And Griffin, you mentioned, yeah, he probably thinks I'm going to be a Boston Celtic until my waning days in the NBA. And now all of a sudden he's going to be a trade piece. And I'm sure Drew Holiday isn't looking out there going, oh yeah, I want to move to Dallas during my age 35 season. Oh yeah, I want to move to Houston during my age 35. He doesn't want to do that. I mean, Drew Holiday does not want to move yet again after again. He's already moved from specifically Philadelphia to New Orleans, New Orleans to Milwaukee, and then Milwaukee to Boston. And again, he wasn't in Portland for very long there, but all these other cities, I mean, he's had to physically get up and move from place to place with his children and his wife. So to me, at age 34, 35, he probably wants to settle down a little bit somewhere. He probably wants to find himself a legitimate home. And I'll say this too. He probably thought Milwaukee was going to be that home. You win a championship with the Milwaukee Bucks, they give him a big extension on top of an already big contract he had at the time with the Bucks. And he's probably thinking, oh, this is going to be the spot for me. Milwaukee, we could win multiple championships here, and I'm going to live here for the foreseeable future. Obviously, the Milwaukee Bucks situation doesn't work out, and the Bucks, the Celtics make the chess move of going out to get Drew Holiday after the Bucks trade for Damian Lillard and trade away Drew Holiday for Damian Lillard. But in that circumstance, Drew Holiday comes to the Boston Celtics. He's traded there, and he probably thinks he's going to end his career with the Celtics after winning a championship, after signing that big deal. And now all of a sudden he's met with the prospect of potentially moving elsewhere. And that's just something I see him not wanting to do at his
no,
age and his also the just where he is in his career. Obviously, age 34, 35, but just in general, you won 2 championships. You're a veteran player, you're very established in this league. There's not much more to prove for Drew Holiday other than just adding on to his already Hall of Fame resume. And I think if you look at that quote, it's a player perspective quote because the team is going, all right, what is in the best interest of us, either
Mhm.
financially or long term or both, right? Because the team is looking at this going, if we can move off Drew Holiday now, if the Boston Celtics can move off of Drew Holiday now and get something for Drew Holiday, that's better than just sitting on the asset long term, paying a massive luxury tax and not really getting. To me, the Celtics are not going to compete for a championship next year.
No.
25, 26 is just not happening.
Can I
And
say
so
too?
I could see the team just looking at it from that perspective and again moving on from Drew Holiday. But from Holiday's perspective, he doesn't care about what the team the team's financial position or what the team's long-term goals are. I mean, he cares about being in Boston, being with the Celtics, competing with the Celtics, whether or not they have the chance to win the title. And I think that I'm kind of calling cap on that quote a little bit, going, "Oh, we still have a very good chance." Maybe he thinks we have a good chance to win 2 seasons from now and 3 seasons from now, and he still believes he can be an effective play. He can be an effective player at that point in his career still. I could see that world for Drew. But as for next season, the Celtics aren't competing for the title next year.
No.
And I'm sure Drew knows that. I'm sure the Celtics organization, they understand that. And the front office and the ownership, they're gonna make moves based upon what next season looks like and what they see as the long term 2 years, 3 years out when Jason Tatum comes back into the lineup. The front office and the ownership, they're going to be looking at those factors, and it's not going to matter of Drew Holiday, oh, he wants to be in Boston, or he thinks we have a chance to win, or oh, he doesn't want to move. It's like those things aren't going to matter to the front office. They're going to simply move off of him if the offer is correct and if they simply want to shed his salary at the end of the day. And what's so tough about this is Drew is a very effective player for the Celtics still. Offensively, he has certainly regressed, and this is what's just going to be so hard about moving Holiday is he's
He got us not
regressed as a player.
18 too. But can I say he got us 18 too, and I think that's the thing I
Mhm.
look at is like you don't win 18 without Holiday. And I found the picture, by the way, so I got to pull it up. Look at just how joyful Brad was, and there's another one I have too. This one is the one that I remember of. Remember when he's just looking over, smiling the whole time, like because he knew. I don't know if you guys talk about that
That's a
Celtics
nice
Talk Weekly.
that's a
What was
nice
that?
photo right there.
He knew though. Look, like Drew Holiday was like you see, he kind of has that Luca face, like he's like, oh, I'm traded again. I got taken away from my home that I expected to be with the rest of my career. And Brad's like, that's 18. I gotta edit like the 18 banner 18 by Brad's face or something like that because he knew. But I think this too, Seamus. I'm gonna say this. You don't win banner 18 without Drew Holiday. I mean, Porzingis, we won it without Porzingis, like because he barely even played. But without Drew Holiday, that was the move that really got you over the hump. So I think that's why it's gonna sting so bad. But even like you said, you continue. Sorry, I just had to throw that out there.
No, I know. I completely agree. If you bring a championship somewhere, I mean, you're automatically just immortalized in that location, and that is a positive thing about the Celtics team. It's not as if they didn't get over the hump and now everybody's, now it's a failed experiment and everybody's being broken up and we don't know when we're going to contend again. I mean, the Celtics team made it over the hump. They have a championship. They're up in the rafters. I mean, obviously, you see behind me here. Uh, it's like they're going to be talked about forever. You look at the '08 team. The sad part about the Big Three era Celtics, and it's funny we call it the Big Three era Celtics, even though it was, I mean, it was a Big Four with Rondo, KG, Paul Pierce, Ray Allen. The era with those four. The sad part about that era is the fact they actually underachieved. People forget they underachieved. They were
Oh,
together for 5 solid years, from 2007 to 2012. And yes, Paul and KG, they were there in 2013, but by that time Ray Allen was out the door. So you're talking 5 solid years with at least the big three plus Rondo. And through that time period, the Celtics, they only won one title, and it was in their first season with
and
that with that iteration and with that group. and I might be having some internet troubles here. I don't
Well,
know if
can I
Griffin
say I could hear you. But
can
I
hear
do
me
want to
right
say,
now.
yeah, I could hear you, Seamus. But I do want to say this too. I was talking to a one second, you guys. Let me just fix this really quick. I was saying this. I know from my perspective, when I went to the championship parade, there was this vibe in the air. Oh, Seamus, we're back. Sorry, a little. Oh, Seamus is a little
Get that
glitchy.
Knicks logo right here.
Yeah, we
No,
get
I
that
yeah, internet
again.
issues this morning. We had a
All good.
transformer went out. We got power going out. We got typical stuff.
Yeah,
Typical Monday. Wait, no, it's Sunday. It's Sunday right
Sunday.
now. Like,
Sunday.
it's
Yeah,
not
a
good
little
Monday
Sunday.
morning.
Felt like a Monday though. But I
It
gotta say
does.
this is what I was saying. So I was at the championship parade last year, and I was talking to this random fan, and I'm gonna quote, like, kind of give you like a conversation leak that I was having with this random fan. So we were saying, oh, we have like a 5-year window with this team. We do. We have 5 years, and I believe if we got the same opportunity with 5 years, there were championships written all over it with this team if we kept this core. However, with the salary, it's going to be difficult. And now with Jason Tatum going down, and we have this one still from then. I mean, you guys have seen this on the last two podcasts too. With Jason Tatum going down, the conversation has changed. But I think in I don't know if you're gonna agree with me, but we need to remember 18. And I believe that we had this conversation now. It sucks and it hurts, but I think I was so happy to witness a championship in Boston. Like 2008, I was so young. I was
Yeah, we don't
2 years
have
old.
any.
I didn't even watch it. But like I was able to witness a Boston Celtics championship, and that's what makes me happy. And the thing that sucks is that I feel like the pieces are leaving. And you saw this, when they started trading their assets that they had. It hurts. It hurts. And I experienced this already from a Boston Red Sox standpoint when they won the championship in 2018, and then they started ripping apart that team, and it hurts. And I do want to bring up this quote, Seamus, about another player that we got to talk about now. I mean, Derek White, who, here's the quote: one of the things I'm most proud of is that I was able to put on a Boston Celtics uniform. And I put the picture of him in the Red Sox uniform because growing up, he was a Red Sox fan. Dad, big Red Sox fan. Uh, what does this mean now? Because, we knew Porzingis was on the trade block. We knew Drew Holiday's up there, his name being tossed around. We know Sam Hauser, but Derek White now? And I know you mentioned this too on the post game, Seamus, but what's this about? Does this cause any nerves in your body? Like Derek White, like this is a name that we essentially think is safe, but you could get a lot of trade value from him. So we talk about Drew Holiday, where that's a tough one because we built up a relationship with him in the 2 years he's been in Boston. But Derek White, he's a guy too, and I'm gonna say a little story. I did not like Derek White when he first came to Boston. And I think I've mentioned this before, but I was very upset because I love Josh Richardson. And I was like, there are two
Wow.
players. No, don't no, listen.
I was not a I was not a, I mean, I like Jay Rich from a personality perspective, but I thought he was just sometimes a disaster on
Yeah,
court.
I agree. So I was like, there are two players that I do not want the Boston Celtics to get. Kyle Anderson or Derek White. I did not like those two players. I don't know why. I hated those two
It
players.
would have been great for the Celtics. I mean, other than the fact Kyle Anderson shoots 29% for three. I mean, defensively, experience wise, and seems to be a good locker room guy.
Well, I'm gonna say
No, no,
this.
I understand the irrational fears of guys because, like, personally, just telling a personal story, like, I have a best friend. He dislikes Brooke Lopez. And it's like I love Brooke Lopez, like how he's transformed his
I'm
game
all
over
right.
time to become a perimeter big,
Yeah.
and I believe in people becoming versatile, right? I believe in people mining their craft and skills. Like Brooke Lopez went from being this low post big to being this. stretch the floor, stretch five big, and he still does all the low post stuff. And I'm going, this man's awesome, but other people, it's like, Brooke Lopez.
No, yeah, but I with Derek White, I was not happy. But I look back at it and I'm like, I wanted DeJounte Murray. Like if we're trading anyone from the Spurs, I want DeJounte Murray. I don't want Derek White. No, heck no. But I look at this Derek White trade and I would totally take Derek White over DeJounte Murray any day. And that might be a biased take, but it's true. And I'm gonna say this. I went to a game and I saw Derek White there, and I was like, all right, I'm starting to like him a little more. Like I think it was his first game with Boston or his second. I'm not sure. It was one of the first ones, and I'm one of these podcasts remind me, and I'll pull up a picture because I was right by Derek White. I was like, all right, I'm starting to look him like him a little more. All right, he's growing on me. I'm watching him live. But then he became an animal. And that's when I started, all right, I'm on the Derek White train. And I will say I was on the Derek White train before his incredible shot. I was a Derek White fan before then, but I've grown to love Derek White and him being one of my favorite players. So seeing that cause some nerves. I don't know about you, Seamus, but what does that quote have to say from Derek White? And I think this was the hardest one to pull up because what does he know now? What does he
I,
know that we don't know?
I don't, that quote doesn't concern me as much as
Okay.
it just shows me that Derek White is aware of the Celtics situation. And it's not like, to me, they're, after every season and even during seasons, who's so funny is like the NBA playoffs. Like, look who's in the conference finals right now: the Pacers and the Knicks, and then on the other side of the bracket, you have Minnesota waiting for either OKC or Denver playing a Game 7 today. But you just look at it and go, man, we as fans fans of the NBA, observers of the NBA, analysts, we all think, oh, we know what's going to happen, right? Like we know the guarantees and what's eventually going to play out here. And then it doesn't play out how you ever think it's going to play out. Something random happens, something just goes completely awry or actually goes and depending on which side you're looking at, it's like, "Whoa, this really flipped towards our way." Like the Bucks trading for Damian Lillard and then the Celtics eventually going out and getting Drew Holiday. That's a moment where you're going, "Whoa, didn't really expect that little chess move to happen." Like
Yeah.
that was a huge thing. Just we were on that topic earlier, but things like that where you just don't expect a team to do something, whether it's in a negative or positive way, and that can be on court winning a ball game or just making a transaction off court. um, Derek White is seen as a lock to be on this team next season by a good portion of the fan base and a lot of analysts out there. I think it's a widely agreeable point that Derek White has a valuable contract. He makes $28 million. He is a player who is worth that money. He is younger. He is 29 years old. He's not in his 30s already. You're talking about some other guy. We're obviously this season we talked a lot about Horford and Drew Holiday being older characters on this team, and then even Porzingis. I mean, they're treating him as if he's an old guy on this team, and he's going into his 30s. But Derek White, 29 years old, or 29, 30 years old right now. I believe he just turned 30, if I'm not mistaken, not too long ago. Um, but regardless, he has a couple more years left. I think he has probably 3 prime years left where he's really Derek White, and then after that, you'll probably start to see him decline a little bit, like we saw with Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday, 34, 35. That's when we're starting to see Drew Holiday regress. Derek White, he probably has 3 more seasons where he is really Derek White. That level of Derek White we're seeing right now, where he's a borderline All Star. I didn't really think he was a borderline All Star this season. Maybe last year for sure. This season, not so much, although I understand the numbers this year that they were upticked in multiple regards because of his usage. But I think the play was actually better last season than it was this season. Although Derek White was just brilliant the second half of the season, regardless. Um, but that's where I think is just his value within his contract, the contractual value with Derek White, the relative contractual value and on court value of Derek White is there for the Celtics to keep him. I mean, it's like a Peyton Pritchard situation where you're going, you're not getting better value out of a player if you're
Mhm.
trading Peyton Pritchard away. You're not getting back better value in return if you're trading away a guy like Peyton Pritchard. That's the same thing with Derek White. Derek White, there's not too many more valuable players out there that you could say, oh, this player is going to be as valuable as Derek White for all the intangibles he brings on court for this $28 million salary. There just aren't too many players out there that are bringing the same value at level of deal
Oh,
lower.
I think Seamus, I think your internet's going a little haywire really quick, but yeah, I'll just that Knicks logo again. I mean, geez, we'll have to get that out of there, but um, I'll put it on one man really quick. Yeah, but I think what Seamus is saying, like, there's no other guy really that you could kind of put into perspective and you could trade for Derek White. I think you look at it maybe if you got some picks, like maybe a young guy, and that's even a toss up. But I don't believe that there's any other value than Derek White. And you look at that and it's like, man, I don't know. It scares me to see that quote, but I think he, like what Seamus already touched upon, is he put that quote out there because there's a possibility and you really got to take that into consideration. Um, I do want to start, and we'll have Seamus pop in when he comes back, and we'll have his take after. Oh, he's back. So I will have Seamus brush up on Seamus. You're back. Internet a little haywire. You said about that transformer.
Yeah, the hot spot is gotta
Well,
switch gotta switch
well,
gotta switch the hot spot. I gotta say that's
yeah.
important.
I do want to say this. I kind of brushed up on your take a little more, and I think we'll get into a few more takes after. But like I'm gonna say too, the content this off season is gonna go crazy. So be aware and stay updated because it's not like we're like with the NBA. We're not going to Cancun. We're staying right here. We're gonna give you plenty of content this off season.
Isn't
Um,
it? Wait, didn't you say the other day, Griffin? You're like, I don't want to go to Cancun. I'm like, this
I,
might be
I
the only time anyone has ever not wanted to go to Cancun.
yeah, I don't want to go to Cancun. That's what I'm saying.
Cancun is fun. I will say it's fun. I mean,
You been?
the oh,
I
of
haven't been to
course.
Cancun.
I know that's kind of like a when I'm saying like, oh, of course, like yeah, it's like a place that's it's like yeah, not guaranteed that people are going to Cancun. We'll say that
Yeah.
like, oh, of course they would go to Cancun, but yeah, I've been to Cancun, and I mean, it's a resort place. That's all you got to say. It's a resort. There are a million resorts there, and like, okay, like there are just a million resorts, and you just there are. I don't know how you give a whole monologue of Cancun here because I can understand why players go down there for the off season. I mean, really, like looking at some of the most relaxed. If I'm actually looking at my entire life, right, like my entire the if you the oh my life flash before my eyes, like what are the most comfortable moments of your life? Like where are you the most relaxed? It's like definitely on a beach in Cancun, like definitely at a resort in Cancun. It's like that is where you're most relaxed in life. Like that is straight up just where you're most relaxed. But I'll say this, Derek White, on that point, it's always man, it is early right now. It's
Yeah,
not that early.
and
It's
I
not
still,
that early.
but
But
I
I'm just like, man, I'm like, I feel like I need to drive to the rim right now. I'm just chucking up shots. I gotta okay,
but
so Derek White here. I just want to get on this point of Derek White. It's always seen from fans out there that oh Derek White and any player, it's like oh this is a guarantee that they'll be around. This team isn't trading this player. I mean we obviously just saw the Dallas Mavericks. They traded away Luka Doncic for reasons that I just
Cooper flag, capture the flag. That's what they were doing.
no
That's what they were doing.
no
There was some money involved. Capture the flag.
no like I
We'll
don't
get
know
into all of that.
conspiratorially I think we could talk about that, but it's like we always think as NBA observers and fans and analysts, oh, we know exactly what's going to happen. We understand like oh, this team isn't giving up this player. There's no way this player could be moved for this player and like oh, this team wouldn't do this transaction or this team is going to beat this team, but in reality, things go awry in the NBA. And Derek White, that quote that we just pulled up a while ago, it's not really concerning to me other than just it shows me that Derek White understands that this is a volatile league and anything can happen at any time. And especially in this offseason where the Celtics are going to be making a lot of decisions on the roster, I don't think he already knows. Like, if he's playing a playoff series, that quote came out after game 6. If he's playing a playoff series against the Knicks where they're trying to force a game seven and trying to win the series, why would he know anything about what's going to happen in the
He would.
offseason?
He wouldn't. No,
Like he's not he's nobody is directly pursuing Derek White right now and talking to him about, oh, well, in the offseason we think we're gonna move you. Like that's not
no.
that
That's not
you're
even a
telling me at
topic.
any point in the season where we thought we were gonna win the title because Griffin, you were talking about it. If this team won the title, you were talking about it on post game the other night. If this team won the title, if the 24-25 Celtics won the title, there was a chance that this team was put together yet again in the same exact manner, and we ran it back a third year. The Celtics
Yeah.
ran it back a third year if they won the title. So why would anybody be up in Derek White's grill in the
Mm,
regular season, in the postseason about, oh, well, this doesn't work out. We're going to deal you away. I don't think
yeah.
that was the case
No.
whatsoever, and so I don't think he knows anything, but he understands that it's a volatile business the NBA is running. You can be out of the league at any moment in time. I mean, it's a make or miss league. You either perform or I mean you're sitting on the bench. You're playing over in China. That's just the bottom line of what the league is. No matter what your status is, what your
You
name is,
become
what
a
your
safety
contract
blanket.
is, everything. And so for Derek White, he understands, okay, he might be in a safe position. I think he's in one of the safer positions on the roster. I think him and Pritchard actually own the safest positions, straight
And
up. Derek
and,
White and Peyton
and
Pritchard.
Tatum.
Oh,
But
and Tatum, you're correct.
those,
Tatum,
but those
100%.
three,
But
those
even Jalen Brown, like Jalen Brown, you could make an argument that the Celtics might try to move on from him because of his like a lot of people believe Derek or not Derek White, Jalen Brown's contract later on down the line is horrendous. You're paying him $70 million 3 seasons from now, and yes, Jalen Brown could still be in his prime at that point, and he might be actually looking for another extension beyond that. But that's a lot of money. Like the people have talked about, okay, if you're paying Jalen Brown upwards of $70 million for the player he is, very good all-star level player, but is Jalen Brown upper echelon? Is he top 10 in the
yeah.
league? If he's not top 10, how are you going to build out the rest of your roster with a guy like Jalen Brown, who's a clear number two or maybe a number three on a really talented roster with really talented stars? How are you going to build out the rest of your roster when you're paying this guy $70 million? So that's why I could see the argument for Jalen Brown being formed out there. But as for Derek White and Peyton Pritchard, you're just not going to find too much more. I mean, Derek White is a guy you could actually trade for multiple assets if you wanted to. Like, I think if you really wanted to get something this summer that could set you up for the future, if you're the Celtics, you could explore a Derek White trade because Derek White, I think, is going to net you the most out of all of the. I
On our
mean,
roster.
outside of Brown and Tatum, I
Yeah.
think Derek White would net you the most if you're the Celtics
Oh,
because of his
100%.
contract, because of his just his general play on court, his connectivity that he has within an offense, his defensive capabilities. Derek White would net you the most return. I mean, he would net you more than Drew Holiday, certainly. He'd net you more than Kristaps Porzingis. He'd net you more than Sam Hauser. And then those are the three players we're primarily talking about with the Celtics and potentially trading anybody this offseason. But Derek White, he would net the Celtics a good amount of potentially picks and maybe even a good player that
Yeah.
might not be as good as him, but is
But
still pretty good enough to be in the rotation. So the
definitely not
Celtics
Josh
could.
Richardson. Definitely not Josh Richardson anymore.
Is Josh Richardson on a team right now? I think he was
I
waived by the
Miami.
Jazz earlier this
Oh, I
year.
thought he was with the Miami
He was in
Heat.
that. He no, he was in the big. He was in the big Jimmy Butler trade. He was with the Miami Heat, but he was in that big
Yeah, I mentioned
16
about
deal.
Wade.
I think he was sent to Utah and then waived. And got to track the former Celtics out there. I always know where they're going. But
Yeah.
so just in terms of Derek White, it's completely plausible that the Celtics could look to gain assets out of him. But I just look at it and go, okay, you probably have 3 more seasons of prime Derek White, and that's including 2 years where you have Tatum down
Yeah.
the road. So Derek White at his number right now, his contract number, and the value he does bring and the longevity he potentially still has in front of him, there's a solid case to be made that he's a safe name on the roster. But at the same time, he is one of the only
Value.
legitimately tradable assets for the Celtics where you could say, oh, if you trade him, you could get equal, if not more value out of him. Jalen Brown, I feel like, okay,
You're
you're
getting
not
less.
getting more you're not getting more value because you're trading away a massive deal. And I think teams will be hesitant and giving away more assets for a massive deal. You're not trading away Tatum, so that's just to me unrealistic, especially with an Achilles tear right now. You're
But
just
you're
not
not
trading away
trading.
Tatum if you're the Celtics.
Right.
And then the other players, I mean, I've gone over it before why Drew Holiday, Porzingis, Hauser, they're going to be hard to move because they just don't have the on-court value matching up with their contractual value. Derek White, on the other hand, I mean, his contractual value is right here, his on-court value is up here. And so, to me, that quote from Derek White, I just think he understands his position of, yes, I might be safe, like theoretically, but anything can happen. Anything can happen in the NBA. If Luka Doncic can be moved away from the Dallas Mavericks, anything can happen in the NBA. And I think just at the end of the season, it's just like even here, like on post game and whatnot, like on Celtics Talk Weekly, Celtics Nation Rise here, we at the end of the season, it's like at the end of post game, it's like, thank you all for watching this season. It was an honor to be with everybody. If it's like we're not stopping, like we're
No,
not stopping within like we're continuously gonna be posting throughout the off season and recording. Like right now, like we're recording throughout
we're
the
gonna
off
be
season. But
Seamus.
it's
I
still
think
it's like a like respect thing at the end of the
yeah,
season.
it's like
It's a
yeah,
kind of like a formal symbolic thing. You know what I'm saying? Like that's where I see is all those quotes. It's like Derek White knows he's safe, but it's like, hey, this is the end of the season. Like, let me give respect to the season in which I just had with this team because although we didn't meet our goal, it's like you have to enjoy the time in which you're still on earth and with the people you're around. So I just think that quote embodies that more so than oh, I'm not going to be here next season. I don't think that
yeah,
concerns me at all. I think it's just the general respect for the situation in which Derek White has, which is knowing this could end at any moment. And the season in which we just went through, yes, we didn't meet our goal, but it's going to be a special time in his life to think back. Oh, I won the championship, and I competed for a back-to-back title with the Boston Celtics. I mean, think about how many people on earth can say that. Not too many people at all, at
yeah.
all.
I agree, but it's coming into that time in our program where you're not going to see Seamus and I's face for a few minutes. We're gonna break down the Celtics Nation Rise MVPs for the 24-25 season. There's a lot of names in here. It was a pretty large leaderboard. Seamus, are you ready?
Let's go. Let's
All
do
right.
this.
Let's hammer this down. So first on our list though is no other than Jaden Springer. So in the 24-25 season, Jaden Springer before getting traded to the Rockets, then the Wave going to the Utah Jazz, but Jaden Springer, and I think this is one memory we will always remember from Jaden Springer against the Los Angeles Clippers. He recorded 8 points, 2 rebounds, and 4 steals, bringing the Celtics to win that game. I think that's a day to remember in Celtics history, and you remember it vividly, don't you, Seamus?
Oh, for sure, because I was solo on post game that night. Did an hour on the Jaden Springer game plus afterwards I did a film breakdown on it, and that was back when we were doing breakdowns on the program. And Jaden Springer was just phenomenal that game from a defensive stand. I mean, Jaden Springer obviously traded away from the Celtics halfway through the season to the Houston Rockets, but despite what a player, you think about him like, oh, this guy's an end of the bench guy, and this guy doesn't play, and blah. Jaden Springer, you watch the film. I mean, looking at Jaden Springer, you could teach, kids who own aspirations within the game of basketball and playing basketball. I mean, watch some Jaden Springer film, especially on the defensive end of the floor. I mean, just on the defensive end of the floor. Jaden Springer, let's face it, raw offensive player, but elite defensive player. I mean, his positioning and his technique on the defensive end of the floor. I mean, it's amongst the elite in the NBA, and it would be nice to see his offensive game come around because I think Jaden Springer, if his offensive game did come around, you could see him get more minutes, and under that circumstance you could start seeing him become an all defensive type of player because that is how good of a defensive player Jaden Springer is, just straight up. I mean, we know it sounds crazy probably to other fan bases coming from the Celtic side of things when we're talking about Jaden Springer, but we know about Jaden Springer's talent, and he was cut from the roster. I mean, he was traded away from the roster halfway through the season because of the salary in which he was making. He was making a minimum deal. However, at the same time, if the Celtics did what they did at the deadline, they were going to shed $11 million off of the about $11 million off of the salary books And so how the luxury tax works is, you go over the luxury tax line. Now they have both aprons, the first apron and the second apron of the luxury tax. And essentially, just if you cross that luxury tax line, you're paying an extra couple dollars to every dollar you spend over the line. And so Jaden Springer, we're an extra 2 million over the line. That equated to an extra what, 10, 11 million dollars over the luxury tax, which ownership pays. So that's why Jaden Springer was moved away from the team. Is you cut that $2 million off. He wasn't a crucial player on the Celtics roster. Therefore, the ownership in the front office, they go ahead and trade away Springer for a fake second round pick, and essentially that saved ownership $11 million, $10 to $11 million in their own money in the grand scheme of everything. So that $2 million salary was secretly an $11 million salary behind the scenes to the ownership. That's why the Celtics moved off of Springer, but otherwise the talent was there. The defensive talent was there. We could understand why Brad Stevens went ahead and traded for Jaden Springer back in not in the, I almost said the offseason, the trade deadline. He traded for the Brad Stevens traded for Jaden Springer at the trade deadline in 2024, and just defensively, Jaden Springer was just a phenomenal player with the Celtics. Unfortunately, it didn't work out long term, but and I'm
Yeah.
telling you, if you look at the film defensively, the way
He
Jaden Springer
played just like
positions
a Marcus
himself
Smart.
on ball on that end of the floor, pressures on ball, and gets up into guys' grills. His footwork, his just base in general, like his core, his feet, just how everything is aligned on the defensive end of the floor. He has all the right techniques, and I think also working with a player like Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday has the same traits within his game. I think Jaden Springer, that probably did something pretty good for his career moving forward into the future as he continues to try to make a space in the NBA anywhere. Right now, he's with the Jazz, but it's not guaranteed Jaden Springer will be in the league next year. However, we all know the talent is certainly there. At only 20, now going on 23 years old for Jaden Springer, to be an impact player, especially again on that defensive end of the floor. He kind of reminds me a little bit of a Chris Dunn type, where he
Yeah.
just
Oh,
elite defensive player, but offensively it's a little rough. Needs a bit of refining on the offensive end of the floor, but defensively, just I can't say enough good things about Jaden Springer and his ability to get after it on that end of the floor.
yeah. But that brings us into our next one. Baylor Shireman, my guy. And I think I'll yap about him for a second. But after the 24-25 season, Baylor Shireman got his one Celtics Nation Rise MVP. And you went with Porzingis for this. We were talking about the 3 straight player spotlights. But for Celtics Nation Rise, I gave it to Baylor Shireman, who in this game against the Brooklyn Nets had 20 points, 3 rebounds, 1 assist, 2 steals, and shot 87.5% from the field goal. He was just a complete great factor in that game. And I look back at him. I watched him so much in the G League and was able to interview him. So go check that out. He was making rondo passes this season, and he's a player with kind of the moves that we have to make this offseason. He's kind of a player that to watch out for next season, because he's a player that I could see getting a significant amount of time with the Boston Celtics and developing into quite the player, especially possibly with the absence of Sam Hauser. But what are your thoughts about Baylor Shireman? Do you think he deserved this Celtics Nation Rise MVP over Kristaps Porzingis? And do you like the fact that our rookie from Creighton got this opportunity?
Okay, so Baylor Shireman, he is the future Sam Hauser of the Celtics. And by that, I mean he's going to fill into that. So obviously Tatum's going to be out next season, but Tatum, Brown, there are two starting forwards, the Celtics' two starting forwards. I almost said Sam Hauser. Sam Hauser right now is going to be, I should say Sam Hauser right now is the third forward in the rotation. He's the guy who comes off the bench for Brown or Tatum, and he's that third forward. Next year, it's going to be Baylor Shireman. I believe Sam Hauser is going to be moved on from in the offseason, $10 million deal. The Celtics are going to try to deal him elsewhere, knowing, okay, we're going to try to cut. To me, Sam Hauser's on court value doesn't meet up with his contractual value, which makes him a prime player for the Celtics to move on from in the offseason, making $10 million, knowing you can cut that off your salary books, significantly lower the luxury tax bill, on top of the fact you're not paying a player anymore you believe that's he's probably, to me, he didn't have a $10 million type of season, Sam Hauser, at all. And meanwhile, Baylor Shireman, he only played in his rookie year this past year, and he wasn't available for really the first 50 games. It felt like Baylor
Yeah,
Shireman
he
didn't
was
get any run. The last 25 to 30 games, we saw Baylor Shireman a lot more, and through those 25-30 games, he definitely looked like somebody who could replace Sam Hauser in the future, and doing so making nearly $8 million less than Sam Hauser. And Rob hit on this point just perfectly during a post game earlier this season. He was talking about how Baylor Shireman just has way more within his game. I mean, he has a little bit of a crafty passing ability to himself. He has some of that playmaking. He's a better rebounder than Sam Hauser. He seems like he's a little bit more athletic, a little more agile. He's a better defender than Sam Hauser. Is he a better shooter? Probably not, but let's all face it. Baylor Shireman is somebody who can light it up from three-point land too. It might not be as efficient as Sam Hauser, but Sam Hauser, he was pretty inconsistent this past year, and it's not completely out of the realm of possibilities that Baylor Shireman can't put up some of the same efficiency stats next year, when I believe he will inevitably Baylor Shireman will inevitably rise into a bigger role next year with the Celtics once the Celtics likely move on from Sam Hauser this offseason. Baylor Shireman, he saved, I don't want to say he saved his Celtics career, but the last 20 to 30 games of the season, Shireman definitely put on film something for us to feel good about going ahead into the future, and calling him a future rotation player with this team, and potentially a future replacement for Sam Hauser, who we all know when he's on, he's a pretty crucial piece to the Celtics rotation. A pretty, when he's performing well, he's definitely a player adding to the win total of the Celtics. I think that can be Baylor Shireman next season.
Yeah. No, 100%. So we're going to roll through a couple of these names and then we're going to pick it up because we're going to have a lot to say about the top three. So next one on the list, you already mentioned it, Sam Hauser. That's another player that only got one Celtics Nation Rise MVP
Did
this year.
shoot 40% from three this year. For as
He did.
awful as it seemed like he was shooting on the perimeter this year, did shoot 40% from three. So that's a silver lining with Hauser. And that's certainly a statistic that I believe will pay dividends later on down the line when the Celtics try to move his contract. I hate to talk about it in that way, but when you have a player shooting over 40%, other teams are simply going to look at that number and other shooting numbers, the efficiency stats, and go, yep, give us this shooter. We need a shooter. We need anybody who can shoot the ball. Doesn't matter. Rebounding, defense, playmaking. If Sam Hauser doesn't have all of it, doesn't matter. We need a shooter. Let's go out and get him. Sam Hauser, he did have an okay season efficiency wise, but it didn't really, like, on film, it just didn't seem like it was up to his standard. But
Yeah.
he did shoot 40% from three this year.
Well, talking about that, against the Utah Jazz, he had 33 points, 6 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal, and shot 47.8% from the field goal. So we got to give our flowers to Sam Hauser, like you said. Shooting wise, he was great. He's always a sniper from three. But that brings us into our next name, Drew Holiday, who also got one Celtics Nation Rise MVP. He actually got this MVP against the Miami Heat, where he had 25 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal, 2 blocks, and shot 66.7% from the field goal. We already brushed up
The
a lot.
tornado game, by the way, the tornado
That
game.
was the tornado game. Yes. Go
Yes,
back and watch that and see the craziness over on Celtics Talk Weekly. Go watch the tornado game and you will see Drew Holiday's significance towards that game. I think we already talked a lot about him today, so we'll kind of
right.
brush past him too. But that brings us into our next name, Al Horford, who now we're getting into sixth place. He was tied in sixth place. He had 3 Celtics Nation Rise MVPs this year. And talking about Big Al and his age, the significance he had to this team this year, and just we look at him and we're like, man, how is he not in his 20s? But he had an incredible year, and Seamus, if you just want to brush up on him really quick too, with those three Celtics Nation Rise MVPs, which were totally deserved. But yeah, he had an incredible season.
Later on today, we're likely going to be filming the Celtics Knicks series review, and something that I'll be making evident in that review is just the fact that Al Horford, game 6 against the New York Knicks, that could have been his last career NBA game, and that could have been his last game with the Boston Celtics. Either or. I mean, really, there's a scenario on the table where Al Horford walks this summer to another team for another payday. That is completely possible. The Celtics, because I see a world where maybe the Celtics invite Al Horford back into the organization as a minimum player. But if he's not going to accept that minimum contract or a smaller deal and he can still make $10 million somewhere else, that's money talks. Money talks. And Al Horford, he's walked for that salary before. I mean, when Philadelphia came calling with a $30 million deal, when it was completely inconceivable that Al Horford could be a $30 million player back in 2019, where did Al Horford end up? He ended up in Philly because nobody else was offering him $30 million, especially not the Celtics at that point in time. And so if another team does come around and offer Al Horford $10 million, it's completely plausible that Al Horford walks away from the Celtics. And maybe we didn't see his last NBA game, but we saw his last game
Game.
as a Boston Celtic. But either or, it could be his last NBA game or it could be his last game as a Celtic. We just don't know at this point in time. But Al Horford, for the season he had, major respect towards Al Horford. I mean, he's got to be up there with, I don't talk about favorite Celtics a lot. I believe in players and people performing within organizations and institutions. I don't believe in just, having outright favorites out there. I believe in evaluating production and basing a guideline for who should be out there and who shouldn't on the basis of production. But Al Horford, what he's been able to produce with the Celtics throughout his Celtics career, absolutely unbelievable, especially after rejoining the Celtics back in 2021. And I never thought Al Horford could play as big of a role as he did with this year's Celtics team, especially down the stretch in the playoffs. Obviously, it didn't work out in the playoffs for the Celtics, but the fact that Al Horford was playing 30 minutes per game and starting in the 2025 NBA playoffs for a semifinals team, or rather for a team that made the semifinals at age 38, that is something special. And I always, despite what we saw at the end of the season, always want to commemorate Al Horford in this moment right here, because obviously won the ring last year. That was his shining career highlight. But even this season, the fact he was able to come out and compete and play the way he did, just absolutely respectable. And I believe there are a lot of NBA players out there that should be modeling their games after Al Horford. I shouldn't even say games in terms of how they play the game, but just how they approach the game, right? From a professional perspective, how they approach work every single day. Al Horford has a lot to give in that regard. Just how he takes care of his body, how he gets into the gym, trains in the gym, and just shows up to work every single day, ready to go, ready and prepared, and never missing a beat. Al Horford just never, just there. You never really there's games where Al Horford, yes, he shot 2 of 11 in the next series in one game, but he's gonna have bad shooting performances every now and then. But in terms of being that defensive anchor and being a consistent presence for the Celtics, Al Horford above and beyond for the C's during his career, and especially this season at age 38. That's the big point here, is just how old he is right now. Not an old guy, not a dinosaur. He's not 80, I understand, but
Oh,
38. That's in the NBA. That's getting up there. There's not too many 38-year-olds in the NBA, and he's part of a small collection of players who have made it to that point. And the level of play he's still at, we all thought Al Horford would be breaking down at this point in time, but he's not. We're right now we're thinking, oh, he might have another year or 2 years in him. He might have another 2 seasons in him. And the way he's playing right now, he might not break down anytime soon. And it's going to be this Tom Brady, LeBron James type of thing with Al Horford, where it just never seems to fall off.
yeah. So I'm gonna ask you, Seamus. I don't have any time to text you about this, so I'm gonna ask you right here. I do have to go in a few minutes, so I was wondering if you just wanted to break down the rest of them. I can go through really quick and let you know how many MVPs they had, but if you wanted to keep it going, that's completely fine.
Just
I just
just
want
just keep just keep it running. Keep it running
to
real
gotcha.
quick. Keep it running. We got five more. We got five more.
Yep. All right. So we got
Keep it
Luke
running.
Cornett. We got Luke Cornett, who had 3 Celtics Nation Rise MVPs during the regular season, tied for Al Horford. But however, in the postseason, had 1 Celtics Nation Rise MVP against the New York Knicks. What a incredible season by Luke Cornett. Uh, I can't even get over it, and I wish we had more time because I could brush up on him for so long. But I'm gonna pass through him really quick, bring it up to Derek White, who finished the season in 5th place on the Celtics Nation Rise leaderboard. Holy cow, I couldn't talk right there. Uh, right behind Jaylen Brown, and I believe he had 5 Celtics Nation Rise MVPs. I don't know why I didn't put that down right there. Let me go check really quick. Uh, Yes, he had 5 Celtics Nation Rise MVPs and also got a Celtics Nation Rise MVP against the Orlando Magic. So he was just incredible. We talked a lot about him. But a name that I am shocked to see in 4th place is no other than Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown in the 24-25 NBA season had 6 Celtics Nation Rise MVPs, but also got 1 Celtics Nation Rise MVP against the Orlando Magic. He was incredible, but Seamus, I don't know if it shocks you to see him so far on this leaderboard too. What does that shock you? After like he
Not
scoured,
really because well, number one, the Celtics have a lot of talented players who, let's face it, on a nightly basis, it could be anybody who's making an impact on the Celtics. And I think Jaylen Brown, even though he was an All Star this season, kind of an up and down year. Kind of an up and down year. We talked a theme about Jaylen Brown was just his consistency this year. You'd see on one occasion he'd have a 30-point game, and then the next night it's like, oh, 15 points on just terrible shooting and a lot of turnovers. And so he just a very inconsistent season from Jaylen Brown, even though it was an All Star season. He did have his moments, he did have his games, and he was a consistent presence for the Celtics in some ways, usually on the defensive end of the floor. But in just his overall consistency for this season wasn't exactly there. So it doesn't surprise me that he's this far down the list.
yeah, 100%. But that brings us into our next name on the Celtics Nation Rise MVP leaderboard, Peyton Pritchard, who had incredible achievements this year, winning 6th Man of the Year. And not only that, he also ended up third on the Celtics Nation Rise leaderboard with 7 Celtics Nation Rise MVPs and also got a Celtics Nation Rise MVP. So I during the postseason against the New York Knicks. So he was just incredible. Um, I'm gonna say this: he's been incredible this season, and just seeing the rise of Peyton Pritchard is just amazing. And I want to brush up on how he was just a half court shot maker. Now he does it all for the Boston Celtics. But that brings us into our next name, Kristaps Porzingis, who missed the first half of the season pretty much, and I did not expect him to be this high on the Celtics Nation Rise leaderboard, and he was battling with Jaylen Brown a lot of the season, and he couldn't do it in the off season, but he finished the season with his number, actually, number 8. He had 8 Celtics Nation Rise MVPs this season. So incredible for Porzingis. I love the picture I did right there with the Band-Aid. God,
That'll be an all time picture. And I want to
oh
add on to this too. Not surprising that Kristaps Porzingis is in this position because Kristaps, for as weird of a season as he did have, as obviously you mentioned, he missed the first 17 games of the season, missed 39 games, or sorry, missed 40 games overall this entire year, so nearly half of the season. Even despite that, Kristaps Porzingis, when he was in the lineup, a lot of games came up with the double double, came up with over 20 points, came up with efficient shooting from beyond the arc, from inside the arc as well, inside the restricted area, inside the paint. Kristaps Porzingis, that's what makes his playoff run so disappointing is when he was available this season and when he was healthy, highly effective for the Celtics. And I'm not surprised to see him up on this list because I know if we did a Celtics Talk Weekly player spotlight tally, he would probably be up near the top as well.
yeah, 100%. But Seamus, can we get a drum roll, please? Because this brings us to your Celtics Nation Rise MVP for the season. Drum roll. All right, we have Jason Tatum. I think you guys knew it. Jason Tatum, incredible. And I'm not even, I'll pull this back up, but 25 Celtics Nation Rise MVPs this season. That he was incredible. And I'm gonna say this, his work ethic, and we talk about it, and I'm not gonna even talk about his injury right now because we're talking about the season. So he was just incredible. And I'm gonna bring this graphic back up. He also had two Celtics Nation Rise MVPs against the Orlando Magic, where it's what could have it been for Jason Tatum. But this season, he was just a main factor in the Boston Celtics and well deserving of this MVP. I mean, we knew from the get-go here at Celtics Nation Rise that it was not going to be any there was not going to be any competing with Jason Tatum. So I would do polls on my story on who do you think will get second place, because he was just so far ahead of everyone that it was undeniable that he was going to win the MVP. But he wins your Celtics Nation Rise MVP. Anything you want to say before we get ready to close out the show, Seamus?
Very fitting. And then this is just the moment where you realize, were we just taking Jason Tatum for granted this entire time? Because Jason Tatum was just the ever since he became a superstar in the NBA, this has been the standard for JT. It's like running away with. I mean, forget Celtics Nation Rise MVP. He was almost the NBA MVP this year. I mean,
Yes.
we know what he's able to do with the Celtics, just in terms of his status on the team and what type of player he is with the Celtics, just getting after it on the defensive end of the floor. He expanded his playmaking this season, and then on top of that, too, just was ultra efficient from a scoring perspective. Maybe you like to see him go to the rim a little bit more and not settle so much for the jumper, but at the same time, Jason Tatum, even when he was settling for the jumper, sometimes, especially in that game 4 against New York, sometimes they would just go in. They'd be bad shots, but they would go in, go in, go in. And that's why you can't knock your superstars all the time for taking bad shots, because sometimes they're just the most efficient bad shot makers. And Jason Tatum this season, it's expected to see him at the top of this list. And it's always every single night it starts with, all right, what did Tatum do? What did Tatum do? What did
Yeah.
Tatum do? We're always looking at the box score going, all right, what did Jason Tatum do? Because pretty well every single game we might expect Jason Tatum to be the player spotlight or the Celtics Nation Rise MVP. And this is where I just feel like we take him for granted, or we took him for granted, is now we're literally about to go through an entire season where he is not going to be presented in any player spotlight format, is not going to be presented in any Celtics Nation Rise MVP format, is not going to be presented as the leader in Celtics Nation Rise MVPs or the leader in player spotlights or any of this. See, things that have just always been a given for Tatum. I mean, he has always led in these categories of player spotlights, player of the game, and just being the best player on the Celtics, being in the MVP race for the NBA. All of these things that are ultimately the standard for Jason Tatum that we expect him to be in. He's not going to be involved in all these conversations next year, and that's just where, again, it just seems like we took him for granted, knowing, man, we have this this guy who is so talented to the point where his standard is seriously just racking up the most prestigious honors within the game of basketball, and racking up the most prestigious honors within our own program as well. That's his standard. Now all of a sudden, he's not around. And I mean, I shouldn't say he's not around, but he's not going to be on court next season.
Yeah.
And that's just where I believe, yes, we've been taking Jason Tatum a little for granted, because he was just phenomenal. He was incredible in the 24-25 season, and the 24-25 season was peak Tatum. 24-25 Tatum, that is peak Tatum. Even though the Celtics didn't win the championship this year and Jason Tatum walked off the floor and ended his season with an Achilles tear, 24-25 was peak Tatum. And just I'm hoping he gets back to that stage again within his career and gets back to that level, because Jason Tatum is truly a special player who we just took for granted for all of this time and for all these years, especially knowing this is the standard of what he can bring to this Celtics organization and even to himself. Just winning Celtics Nation Rise MVP by a wide margin, and nearly winning the NBA's MVP
Yeah.
this season as well.
I just gotta say too, we said average Tatum night, and this is for his second Celtics Nation Rise MVP against the Magic, but 35 points, 8 rebounds, 10 assists, 1 steal and shot, 62.5% from the field goal. That's what we are calling. Hold on, I'm gonna pull me back up. Average Tatum night. But we're gonna give more credit to the Celtics Nation Rise MVPs. I'll make sure next podcast we have like their MVPs under for the ticker. But before we close out the show, I do have to say, I like Seamus already mentioned, I'm gonna give the thank you. I wanted to say really quick because I do gotta go. I want to say thank you to everyone for supporting us this year. I wanted to give a big thank you to Celtics Talk Weekly and allowing us to all work together now. And I found it as kind of a rivalry at first. We're competing against Celtics Talk Weekly now. We joined the dark side and we are actually working as a
Ooh, the
team now.
dark side. We're the dark side.
Yep.
Okay.
I love
We're
that.
the
I
dark
love
side
that.
of Celtics media.
Yep.
That's
I
how we
love
gotta
that.
be, though. That's how we gotta be. We
Yeah.
gotta be
How
dogs. If
you
we're at
gotta
the
be.
bottom of the totem pole, we gotta be dogs. That's how
We
it
do. We
works.
do.
So I'm kind of
But
excited for the Celtics next season. It's like, oh, we're not gonna be all cocky and thinking, oh, we're gonna
I
win the
know
championship. It's like, no, we're the underdogs next season.
we're
Let's
the
go.
underdogs.
Like
We're
we're
ready.
back
We're
to it.
underdogs. Underdogs. But to finish off this, because I do gotta go, I want to say thank you, everyone. But keep watching. The content's not going anywhere. The content this offseason is probably going to be at a peak. Like, I think we're going to do more this offseason. Like, obviously, not completely on scheduled days. Usually we record on Wednesdays, but stay tuned, everyone. And that's going to be it for our show. Thank you guys for watching. I have the graphic up. Everyone make sure to like and subscribe and turn on post notifications because this off season is going to be important for the Boston Celtics. So make sure you guys like and subscribe and stay tuned all off season because the content's coming and we're doing it. Thank you guys so much. We will see you guys for the next one. Peace, guys.